I'm very pleased to introduce our next talk. This will be a press conference with OKX, and they'll be discussing expanding the future of trading in Europe. So we're going to hear from Haider and Erald. Can I get a round of applause, please, for them?
Okay, hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. My name is David. I'm with Bitcoin.com News. I'm with Erald Ghoos. We're going to have a little talk about an announcement you just gave. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and then if anyone in the audience has questions, please raise your hand, and I think we'll have a microphone fairy or something give you a microphone for that. But before we start, can you please introduce yourself, sir?
Sure. Hey, I'm Erald Ghoos. I'm the CEO of OKX in Europe. Been with the company for 3 years now. Before that, I was working also in some leadership positions in competitor exchanges. I joined the crypto space in 2017. Before that, I was more in traditional finance. I did a few bank startups in Europe, in different European countries. Originally, I'm from Belgium, background in computer science. Moved out of Belgium in my early 20s, and now since the last 3 years, I'm in Malta.
All right, great. I just watched you on the main stage. Did a great job, sir. Well done.
Thank you.
I asked you if you were using like a teleprompter. You said you weren't. I was genuinely surprised by that. So, again, good job.
Thank you. I was just winging it.
You were just winging it. Okay, could you please summarize your announcement for the fine folks here who maybe didn't see that?
Sure. So what we announced and what we launched today in Europe with OKX is a new product which is called X-Perps. What is X-Perps? It's a 5-year dated future that we launched, or that we are launching today. And the reason why we are launching that today is because up until now, there was quite a gap, quite a dilemma, that a choice that people had to make between or going offshore to unregulated platforms that comes with certain inherent risks, and having good liquidity and a wide product offering, or going for a regulated onshore exchange, but then also having to give up on deep liquidity and on a great product experience. So now what OKX did with the X-Perps is we are bridging that gap under a fully regulated exchange, where we offer great liquidity. And not one thing also that I earlier mentioned is liquidity is the misconception about liquidity. It's not only about the volume, also the spread and the depth or key measure and success factors that traders want to see. So in that sense, in Europe, we probably have a liquidity that rivals some of those unregulated onshore exchanges. So with this product, we really want to bring a lot of the unregulated crypto derivative volumes, which is now going to offshore exchanges. We want to bring that under a regulated environment, a regulated umbrella, taking into account a lot of the consumer protections under a regulated institution that we now have in Europe. So that's the main product announcement.
Okay, very cool. And for my own clarification, X-Perps are fundamentally different than perpetual derivatives, correct?
Correct. Perpetual derivatives, they are, as the name says it, perpetual, you know, like lasting in terms. There's no end date to it. With our X-Perp product, we added or we limited in time. We have it as a 5-year expiry future. Why is that? Because under MiFID, I think it's a month and a half ago that ESMA came up with a product intervention measure that also clarified that you cannot have the perpetuality of these products, else it would be categorized as a CFD, which then falls into a whole different bucket of regulation. Yeah.
Is there still a funding rate similar to a perpetual derivative, or?
There is a funding rate mechanism that we also added. It's a fantastic feature for this product as well. So it's an 8 hourly funding rate mechanism. What does that do? That allows the X-Perp pricing, the pairs that we have there, that every 8 hours they get linked back to the spot price. So the traders who went long will be paying the shorts, and the shorts will be paying the long, in order to make sure that that price, under the derivative products, constantly stays aligned with the spot price of the underlying asset. And that's an amazing feature that we also have added to our X-Perp product.
Okay, so one last follow-up question from me, and then if anyone has questions from the audience. You briefly touched on this idea of kind of reshoring some of the European derivatives trading volume, which is done mostly offshore. You said in the presentation 95% of the European derivatives trading volume happens offshore. Why would that trading volume come back onshore?
Because I believe users, they want to have the best of both. They want to make sure that they're trading on a regulated, secure environment and platform. But also they don't want to give up on all the good liquidity, the product features, all the underlying assets that are available, the margin functionality, also the settlement assets that are available. So I think with this product, we really bridge that gap between offshore and onshore with good product experience and less good product experience. So in that sense, I do believe that a lot of people will be making that transition to go from offshore back to a fully regulated onshore environment. Why? Because also at OKX, in OKX in Europe, we have a fully regulated platform that also allows for local payment methods. So you don't have to choose anymore between going onshore, offshore, where you then don't have access to SIPA or your favorite local payment methods. Like in the Netherlands, we have Ideal. In Poland, we have Blik. In Belgium, we have Bankcontact. So every or most of the countries in Europe, they have their own preferred local payment methods that are accessible for users. That instills trust with people, right? You don't want to use payment methods that you're not comfortable with. So we have that all now integrated under our 3 licenses in Europe in one platform. So it both allows users to have access to their local payment methods, to get fully KYC'd, to make sure they have all the products and services that they're familiar with and that they're trusted with. They can use our pay, they can use their card to pay for their groceries, to go to the shop. Are you okay? and pay.
He was surprised.
I saw something fall.
Okay, yeah.
So in that sense, I do believe that a lot of the users, of the consumers, they want to have that full trusted environment with the payment methods which they know, but then also with the best liquidity, great depth, and spread in their products for trading.
Great. Okay, I have a couple more questions for you, but before I do that, anyone in the audience have a question? There we go. Do we have a microphone? Gnome, over there, here we are. Please raise your hand again if you have a question.
Thank you so much for this insightful conversation. I'm a journalist from Monaco, at Astra Journal, and I have a question regarding Europe. Which European markets matter most for you?
It's a difficult one. All of the markets matter a lot for me, but even though MiCA is great because it harmonizes Europe when it comes to regulation, every market still needs its own local activation and presence. Now, we can go very broad and try to be successful in whole of Europe at the same time. It would be very heavy on resources, product development, localization, translating all our product experience into the local language, because there are 24 official languages in Europe, 30 countries. So it will be a heavy undertaking. Hence why we chose to go for like 5, 6 key priority markets at first, where we want to go deep before we go broad. And those markets are Netherlands, France, Poland, Germany, and Italy and Spain. So the bigger economies, right? So in those markets, we want to be really successful. Once we see that our product offering and our strategy and the brand is picking up in popularity there, we will then also go much broader in whole Europe.
Thank you so much.
That was a great question. Sorry, let me just ask one follow-up, and then we can go to the gentleman right there. Just from seeing some of the presentations and some of the materials at this conference, I got the impression, I'm not Europe-centric media presence, that OKX is moving hard into Europe or making it a focus now. I asked you this backstage, and you indicated that this is the case. Why now?
And that also comes back to MiCA, right? And one concept under MiCA is passporting. So once you have a MiCA license in one of the European countries, it allows you, through a concept called passporting, to use that license that you have in one of the member states and passport it across all of the other 29 member states. Before that, it's very difficult to operate in the whole of Europe because you need to get regulatory approval in all of those member states, right? It's costly, it's time-consuming, it's expensive, and it's complex, right? Because not all of the regulations in Europe, back in the day, they were aligned. Some countries, they had a regulation. Some countries, they completely, banned crypto. Some countries, they were having, some other type of local registration on crypto. So now, thanks to MiCA, it's much more easier for global companies like ourselves to operate and to get access into Europe, which is a huge market, actually. It's bigger than the US. A lot of people don't realize that because Europe has 400, or the EEA, let's call it the European Economical Area. This is the area in which we can passport licenses. It has 480 million people, whereas the US only has 350 million. Of course, the GDP in the US is still, far bigger than Europe, but also in Europe we're getting quite strong on financial education, on assets to spend, on financial literacy. So in that sense, it makes a lot of sense now, also for OKX, to be much more active and much more present in Europe. So that's also a change from back in the day, when we were more known in Asia. And that was also an important step for us to enter Europe, because I'm not sure that without MiCA, the concept of MiCA and passporting, that it would have been a feature or an endeavor that we would have embarked on. This makes it a whole lot easier to access the European market.
Yeah, so I'm Asia-based, and obviously I know OKX through that, but yeah, good to see. Sir.
Sure, thanks. Jaros Belkin, Irish Tech News. I want to roll back a little bit to the risk mitigation that you mentioned earlier. Do you see that as being risk lowered enough for the investors to be interested?
You mean the consumer protection?
Yes.
This product, it is a high-risk product, right? It's not suitable for everybody. So what we have now done as well is we added, completely in line with ESMA and with all the regulations on MiFID, we added the suitability assessment or the appropriateness test, let's call it like that, which is a set of 3 categories of questions and that users need to complete and fill in and pass before they can have access to this product. It's like an education, it's a knowledge test, it's an experience test. So our consumers who want to have access to that product will need to pass that appropriateness test before getting access to that product. So there is a filter up front, which is required by the regulator, so that not anybody who does not have the right financial education or experience can have access to that money. And that's a big difference with the offshore platforms where there is no consumer protection there. So you lose your money, bad luck. This was on the product that was suited or fitted for you, bad luck. So that is indeed that gap that we really try to fit now to make sure that we bring that product under a regulated environment to the consumers in Europe, to the ones who can use this product. It's a niche segment, right? It's not accessible to everybody. Great question.
Very good. Anyone else? Hand raised, no? Keep thinking. I'm going to have a couple more questions. So in the presentation, you said 80% of exchanges will not survive MiCA. Another bold statement, sir. Maybe give a little context for this, and then why?
I think I didn't want to mislead everybody by calling it MiCA, right? MiCA is a heavy regulation, but then if you look into the whole of Europe, the regulatory framework in Europe is very heavy, right? As a global company, OKX, I don't see the same level of regulatory complexity and burden as how we have it in Europe. So if you want to operate an exchange like ours, you need to be fully compliant with MiCA. You want to move stable coins, you need to get a PI license or an EMI license. You want to have derivative products, you need to get a MiFID license. So those are the basic licenses in order just to be operational in business. Next to that, there is the GDPR, the Data Privacy Act. There is DORA. There is DAC 8, DAC 2. There are taxation. Those are taxation rules and regulations that you have to comply with. There is so many different types of regulations in Europe that make it a very heavy burden to operate in Europe. That's why also the 80% was a little bit misleading, because I don't want to attribute it only to MiCA.
I see.
But it's a very heavy regulatory framework now. Also now in the last year, I would say, a lot of the local and smaller competitors, they have come knocking on our door, asking to be acquired, saying like, look, the whole regulatory burden of MiCA, it's heavy for us. We don't have the right tech stack. We don't have the right security features. We don't have the right, infrastructure to compete with some of the global exchanges. So a lot of the companies, they have been approaching us, and I'm sure not only us, but also other competitors, to be acquired. Most of the time, their asking prices were unrealistic, because they priced themselves not only for their user base, but also for the license which they have, for their infrastructure, for their team, which is something that for companies like us doesn't make much sense. Also, we see that there will be much more consolidations happening. There's just a couple of examples from recently or in the last few years where we see that some of the American companies, also in the fintech space, come into Europe, acquire some of the local brands and names and licenses in order to get access to the European market. So from the whole landscape that we've seen before in Europe with multiple local homegrown initiatives, I see that indeed that around 80% roughly will not exist anymore in the next year and a half.
And
sorry to add on that. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't think that's necessarily a good thing.
Okay. Yes.
That's not necessarily a good thing, because I'm quite in favor of a lot of competition. I really welcome competition, because that comes with innovation, ideas, maturity also in the industry. So from that sense, I think it's overregulation is not great for our continent here in Europe.
Okay. All right. Any questions? Raise your hand if you have a question for the gentleman. No takers yet. All right. I just have a question about the current, basically 3 licenses that you need to do different things. You have MiCA, that's the overall, I guess, base level framework. Then you have the PI, that's for payments. And then MiFID is derivatives. Is that correct? Is that roughly correct? Okay, I was talking with another gentleman, and he was comparing the regulatory frameworks in other jurisdictions like MENA or Asia, where those 3 licenses have been combined under one license. And he's a French national, so he said that there is a possibility for such a thing to happen in Europe, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. Do you think that there'll be some simplification of this in the future?
I think there might be, right? Like a harmonization. So I think what would be interesting is to see like a regulation based on the underlying, whether it's like a TradFi underlying or it's a blockchain underlying infrastructure. And then dependent on the type of the underlying, you can get a license that then allows you to offer a wide variety of financial services. Is that something that is realistic in the near future? I don't know, but it might be something quite interesting to follow that same concept as what in UAE is happening.
Yeah, okay. So some optimism there, hopefully. All right, got a couple minutes left. Let's talk about a couple things you mentioned, but again, I wasn't familiar with until I actually spoke with you. So ESMA, this is the regulator of regulators in Europe, and they are who we can thank for this passporting thing. Could you just briefly describe what this passporting mechanism does and,
yes.
and how it actually kind of helps? It makes it easier to...
Absolutely. It's a very welcoming instrument that we have thanks to ESMA. For most of you, you probably remember a time before the European Union or before the EEA, when each country was a sovereign country with its own national bank, central bank independence, rules, regulation, currency. So when then the European Union formed and currently is continued to expand, they also want to have like a more competitive union versus US, versus some Asian markets. Important for that is also to make sure that you're welcoming for innovation and for business. So one of the concepts that was then also implemented, it's not passporting does not exist because of MiCA or because of crypto. It existed way before that, when there was banking, when there was MiFID-1 and EMI licenses back in the day, that you could just rely on one license and then passport it throughout the entire union. Fantastic concept. So, yeah.
Yeah, very, very cool. All right, one last chance. No takers, good. More questions for me. You said that the... Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Good catch.
What country would you like to passport to next is the main question I have.
So we obtained our 3 licenses in Malta. And what we usually do is we passport all our licenses all at once to all the other member states so that we can operate our businesses in there. Are we always very active and have a localized platform in all the other countries? Not necessarily, right? But we want to be active and accessible in a regulated fashion in all of the 30 EEA member states. So this is also now our X-Perps are also going to be live now as of today in all the 30 EEA member states. So all the advanced traders that pass the suitability assessment, as of today, they can start trading on a fully regulated platform with some of the deepest liquidity, tightest spreads, available in Europe on a regulated platform.
Very good. Thank you for the question. What is the timeline for that? From, I guess you get it regulated somewhere, and then that passporting process, the months?
Actually, it's the next day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we got our license, and then once you get our license, you inform the regulator, your home regulator that issued the license. You inform them that you want to passport to which countries that you want. It's a checklist. We take all of the 30 EEA members countries, and then the next day you are good to go. You're passported. The receiving states, they still have like some time. I think it's 20 days or something like that to ask questions or to challenge the procedure. But usually it's quite pro forma and straightforward, the whole passporting concept. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, last question for me. You said that the future of crypto is going to be regulatory. Now, I am a little bit of an OG cypherpunk thing. That kind of hurt my heart a little bit. Oh, okay, but yeah, good, great. Does this also mean that it's going to be institutional? And what is OKX doing in that front? I'm sure you're moving in that direction as well.
Absolutely, because the thing is, what institutions need is they need to have regulatory clarity, right? They also have their responsibility towards shareholders. They also have, in some cases or in most cases, responsibility towards their regulators. So now, since we have the MiCA license, which is now on January last year, we see a massive uptake in regulatory, institutional interest, whereas before, like we were this exchange that, didn't have a license. So it's a massive, massive change in retail and in institutional interest that we're witnessing since we got the licenses.
And it's what? MiCA's been around for now a year and a half, roughly?
Yes, yeah.
And it's taken about a year and a half for institutions to start warming up to crypto, I guess?
The institutions, usually the sales cycle is a little bit longer.
Yeah.
It takes some time, but now we really see the momentum going, and there is a massive interest. Also because of geopolitical changes, also because of what's happening in the US. There is like some new acts, some Clarity Act or whatever the thing was in the US. That
Genius and
Genius
Clarity
Act,
hopefully is going to be done soon. But
yeah, so it also, transcends across the Atlantic Ocean, and now here there's much more institutional interest happening.
All right, Erald Ghoos, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're done. Thank you, guys.
Welcome to Signal Week.